for tonight. Tonight, it feels like I've got eyes for only you, baby, and you're the reason why.
Live on Twitter Spaces, it's Friday, the 17th of November. I'm Randy Kure. This is What's Up the Sports Podcast. Thank you for tuning in, as well as downloading tonight's episode via your favorite podcatcher, or if you're catching us on YouTube, do me a favor and give us a like at What's Up Podcast. What's Up Podcast is with 1P. The Major League Baseball season has come and gone, and for the first time in franchise history, the Texas Rangers are your World Series champions. Despite that, and since then, some big news have taken place since the final out. Here this evening, the same trio who was gracious enough to join me for some baseball chat back in September. Lily Schumacher seems to be in good spirits right now, but we'll see how she's feeling when we talk about her beloved Milwaukee Brewers. Lily, how are you?
Yeah, again, doing I think as good as I probably can, all things considered, but I'd say for the most part, pretty good despite all the turmoil that's happened to the Brewers within the past 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, some very interesting turn of events that have taken place. And speaking of turn of events, and always some exciting news with regards to his beloved New York Mets, Jake Cardinale is here as well. Jake, what's going on?
Not much. I'm home from school for the Thanksgiving break, so I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, no, good for you. And actually, I was saying before you logged on to our call with our final panelists that U.S. Thanksgiving is, of course, coming up next week. And yeah, the Americans definitely do things a lot better than us here in Canada. Speaking of that final panelist, down the street from Jake is where you could find Matt Siriani and his beloved New York Yankees. From my vantage point, Matty, it seems that all is quiet in the Bronx, but I'm sure you're expecting some big things at some point.
Well, not all is entirely quiet. Brian Cashman dropped a bombshell on one of his players, which he really shouldn't have done, but we'll get into that later. But, things are a little bit quiet right now, but hopefully the Yankees make some noise in the offseason like they should and get back to where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, now, you know what? I would be remiss if I didn't mention of your respective Twitter handles. You guys do post some great things with regards to the world of sports. Lily, you could find her at Lily June Shu, SCHU to be precise with shoe. So don't think of your foot warmer.
Exactly.
With Jake Cardinale, you can find him Jake Cardinale 6, and on Instagram, you could find Matt on Siriani Says Sports, if I'm not mistaken. Maddie,
That's
now, do you have Twitter or X as well?
I have it. I hardly use it as much as I probably should. I'm very active on the Instagram side. I'm very active on the Facebook side of things. X or Twitter, as I don't know how you call it now, but I'm gonna be more active on that line too. I promise I will.
Good stuff. No, some great stuff being posted by the three of you. So we will be talking about a number of topics with regards to the Texas Rangers, of course, winning the World Series. Who within the free agent world may be a big help to your respective teams? Of course, the big news coming out of Milwaukee, that being Craig Counsell, who is leaving the Brewers to go to the Cubbies. And of course, and we actually will be talking a little NFL. But first, the news out of the West Coast is that the Oakland Athletics will be heading east and into Sin City. It seems that Las Vegas has become quite the sporting hotbed. Of course, they have the Vegas Golden Knights, and who have done very successfully, winning and are the current Stanley Cup champions. And as well, they have the Raiders moving from said Oakland. Jake, love to start things off with you. And of course, Oakland has had a very tumultuous end to their time in Northern California. Are you surprised it took so long for the Athletics to officially move out of town?
Yes and no. I'm surprised because their stadium has been falling apart for possibly 10 years now. I've never been there, but just from being a baseball fan, pretty much every baseball fan knows, it's pretty much common knowledge that their stadium has been falling apart, that they've been a poverty franchise for a little while now. They haven't done anything in quite a few years. And at this point, it's got to the point where it's really bad. But I'm not surprised just because of how much of a clown John Fisher is. Just how poorly of a job he's done. Like, he's not even trying at this point. I mean, look at the dudes he's rolling out there. Like, he's rolling out guys who I'm not sure could be in AAA as like some of their best players. Like, their third or fourth best starter would probably be a AAA player on pretty much any other team. So surprised and not surprised. So I'm surprised just because when you go back to reality, look at their stadium, look at the attendance, but I'm not surprised as how bad that organization is run.
I mean, I guess especially when it came to the early 2000s, and they just seemed to have a really successful run in producing contending teams and teams who make it to the playoffs. I mean, I guess Father Time, I guess the clock struck 12, and in the end, they weren't able to field any successful lineups there. I mean, with that in itself, and whether it's Jake or Lily or Matt, I mean, they did seem to have a pretty successful program in Northern California.
Well, it really depends. First off, Oakland, California, I will say this. I know several people who live in Oakland, California. It's not the safest place to be. In fact, it's actually one of the more dangerous cities in the country. And the problem with that is they did not really have a successful program because the Raiders were great in the 70s and 80s. And yeah, the Oakland Athletics, they won the three-peat in Oakland and they won their last World Series title in 1989. But if you look at the way things are now, attendance has dropped. And I think what kickstarted this whole thing, the Warriors moving out. Because when the Warriors moved out in 2000, at the end of the 2019 season, that triggered the Raiders to eventually move out, which they did. And then the A's moved out. And when the Raiders left, you saw after the 2020 season, when fans couldn't go to the ballparks, they came back a year later. Attendance figures in Oakland County Coliseum dropped significantly. From 2021 to 2023, Oakland averaged less than 10,000 fans a home game during that 3-year period. So, yes, it's not really that great of a program because the fans are moving out. And I don't know where people are getting this idea of not even staying in Oakland is a possibility. But part of this has to be blamed on the fans because they didn't really show appreciation for their team. Even when Rob Manfred said, we're going to highly consider moving the team to Vegas, fans, quote unquote, tried to make an effort, but their effort just wasn't good enough. And now they're feeling the consequences. But the bottom line is, long-term, Oakland fans are going to be feeling this for a long time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess there's a few things to unpack there. And Matt, you mentioned of the dominoes falling. I mean, Oakland, the Warriors moving to San Francisco, and Lily, I am wondering if, especially in a sport like baseball, because you have 81 dates and you do have the ability to maybe generate revenue. I mean, with yourself, you're in Chicago, and from what I understand, there's quite a bit to do around Wrigley Field. I'm in Toronto, and the downtown core and the entertainment district is relatively close to Rogers Center. Could a baseball stadium be that kind of hub in a sense where fans and a community could spend their money, generate revenue? And did the city of Oakland, in your opinion, miss the boat?
All right. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, and also even to comment, kind of referring back to some previous comments made, but I'll kind of go, I think, in the order of you explaining things. And I think that there always is a possibility. I think a lot of it, though, in Oakland's case, might just have to do with it's not the time to have sports in Oakland anymore, and it clearly just wasn't working. But I think with the way that modern stadiums are being built and the way that, everybody essentially, whenever a new stadium is built, obviously it's state of the art. There's a lot going on in it. They're kind of trying to do everything they can to make each new stadium the best arena, the best venue. We saw that, I think, with one that is highly, highly underrated, the Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee, then obviously SoFi, and it looks like in Las Vegas we're going to get something similar, and potentially something new and similar to that in Tampa Bay / St. Pete's, where they're trying to make it, otherworldly, better than anything else. And a lot of those plans, though, what happens in them is they are also doing more urban planning with it, where they're saying, okay, but we're also going to have bars, we're going to have restaurants, there might be shopping around it. Even something too that happened in like Green Bay, for example, across from Lambeau Field, they had, some open areas. It was old lots. One was like an old Kmart, and they demolished all of it. And across the street, they built a luxury hotel that has a spa. They also built a brewery that existed in Green Bay. They rebuilt a new location to be right there, an area that can be a sledding hill, an ice skating rink, as well as a playground, a football field, as well as townhouses, apartments, different training facilities as well, and like just general health facilities. So even in an area that already existed, they looked at redeveloping this land as something that can be, community spaces and even living in residential spaces. And I think it greatly depends on where you are. Obviously, too, in Wrigley, they can't do the exact same thing, but next to it, they have Gallagher Way, and that is an event space. That's where the Cubs offices are. They are doing markets all the time. They're doing a huge winter wonderland thing right now with the Chris Crindle Markt. And that's kind of been the trend of, I think, stadiums and arenas and venues being built. Milwaukee, Deer District. So it's a great way to generate a lot of revenue and a way to make things happen, but it also depends on the location, where you are, how is that actually going to function within the city. And I think that's where potentially it would fall flat in Oakland. One thing I will say too, though, is talking about, Matt was saying that the fans definitely failed the organization, and I think it's a push and pull, because they did to some extent, but a lot of the distaste and reason that fans weren't showing up is because the organization wasn't investing anything into it. And that was the whole counter boycott, counter protest thing that we saw this season, where fans flooded Oakland, they flooded the stadium, the Coliseum, to say, hey, we can do this, but Fisher isn't investing in this. He's not doing anything to push forward making a new stadium. He's making it impossible for us to enjoy and watch and love this team that we have. And I think, of course, it's easiest to blame the fans, but again, I think Fisher's the biggest, bad party here, because there were things that could have been done. There were multiple plans for stadiums that the city denied for multiple different reasons, and an owner of his caliber should be able to be the person that can help push that forward, or hire people that also can do that. And I think they are going to be missing out on this, and it's going to be a really big vacuum that's really to the detriment of Oakland. But the main point of your question, I think it could help, but I don't think it was going to make a difference in Oakland, even if you do have something that could generate that much revenue. It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, and
and my final
please.
take on it is, it's my. I was actually I was gonna hit them raise my hand, but I probably should have. So that's my bad. But
It's all good.
my final take on it is Like you brought up a good point. It's hard to support a team when like they're not trying. 'Cause, like Fisher, he's not even trying. He traded away everybody. Overall, I didn't really love the value he got back. Like for like Olsen, he got Matt Olsen, the Braves got something back. I know Shea Langeliers hasn't really turned out so far, but on paper he got something back. He got something back from Matt Chapman. Everybody else, he didn't get really that much back. Maybe Sean Murphy, but he didn't get really that much back. So that's why they're in a tough spot because look at their roster. There's really nobody on the roster that has true trade value, and there's not that many blue chip prospects in their system. So how do you fix this? Like I feel like they don't have a way to fix it, and they're clearly not willing to spend money. I'm not sure if that'll change once they get to Vegas. But also, that's happening in 2028. That's 5 years from now. So they're just stuck. They're going to be stuck in the basement of the league probably for a while. And going back to Levy's point on it's hard to support a team when they're not trying. I think that's like for example, Mets fans. I mean, the Mets team has not been very good for a while. They seem to always fall short of expectations pretty much every year since they went to the World Series in 2015. Every year, like this year, they finally take a big step forward, and every year they either completely collapse and miss the playoffs, and even when they do make the playoff, like 2 years ago, you had they blew the division at the end of the year, and you thought, oh well, they can still make a run, and it didn't happen. And of course, this year the complete dumpster fire, missing the playoffs. But because the Mets also have an owner who only recently bought a team who comes in and spends all his money on a team, is honest with the fans. So part of it is because obviously being in Queens, New York, is a more attractive, than Oakland, California. From a safety perspective, to an extent, just overall city. So that's not really a fair comparison. But also, like, even though like Steve Cohen's moves, like to an extent, maybe haven't worked out, he's trying, and I think that's what part of the reason it keeps fans coming back. John Fisher, like you said, like he's not even trying. It's really hard to support a team when it's like I mean, California is expensive enough. Like it's very expensive here in New York. California is even more expensive. So if I'm a fan, it's like I'm a fan. Like I can barely afford to live here. Why should I spend all this money on going to see the Oakland Athletics when we know they're going to be 52 and 110 this year, and the owner is rolling out double A guys, and his cleanup hitter might be a double A player, his third best pitcher might be a double A player. So it's really hard to support a team when the owner just clearly isn't trying. Randy, I think you're muted.
Thank you for the heads up. I was kind of speaking to Matt's point that the stadium and the fans weren't really going to the game and so on. And you take a look at a team like Baltimore when they moved to Camden Yards, and even to this day, baseball just seems to really revel with Oriole Park, but there was a long stretch where there was a very little fan support. But I mean, hey, if you build a winner, then the fans will come. And sure, Oakland has had some difficulty, not only with the team, but I guess with the surrounding community as well. Very quickly, I have to say, when I was a younger guy growing up, that the Athletics were just one of those really intriguing teams, and one of those very scary teams as well. Making the World Series in the '80s, they had a 3-year stretch. They won in '89, and that was, of course, during the Bash Brothers. And I mean, for me personally, the Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire were really one of the first alluring factors of why I became a baseball fan. They were just so dominant. Very quickly around the horn, love to hear when you think of the Oakland Athletics, what jumps out at you? Maddie, you want to start?
Yeah. Well, I could be a biased Yankee fan saying the Derek Jeter flip play is what I think of when I think of the Oakland Athletics. But if I'm going to be realistic with myself and think of the A's in a positive light, I would say the three-peat from 72 to 74 is probably what I'm going to remember most about them, because that was the period of time where they were at their most successful point in their franchise history. And I could say 89 when they last won the World Series because that was when Mark McGwire was half the man he was. But I got to go with the 3P. I think that's the most memorable I can say about the Oakland A's.
I'd
Lily?
probably say
Oh,
just
Jake, please.
Yeah, Jake's good. Yeah.
I'd probably say honestly, Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco. I forgot like they used to call them something. I don't
Bash
even
Brothers.
remember. The Bash Brothers. I know. Like I think they would bat right next to each other because like when one guy would come up, he hit a home run. He'd run around the bases. He'd greet the other one, and they do this with their arms.
Sure.
And so I just obviously I wasn't like alive for that. I just when I think of the A's, I think of Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco every year going out and hitting 40, 50 homers. Yes, they were, they had some substances in them that maybe they shouldn't have, but personally, I don't think that's that big of a deal. It's a whole other conversation. It's a whole other podcast, but the Bash Brothers is probably what I think of when I think of the A's.
I would also say part of it is Bash Brothers, but part of it is this is so sad, but part of it is also because of the Lonely Island movie comedy, the unauthorized Bash Brothers musical thing that they did. And my boyfriend really likes it, so then I'm not constantly reminded of that, but that's part of it. Honestly, and then the other thing too, like I feel like, kind of I would say early on getting into baseball, and even to the thing that a lot of people, even if they don't like the game, something they like about the sport is Moneyball. And I feel like that's an easy thing to always be connected to and thinking about, the way that they were looking at saving money but trying to put out a good product and make a good team. And just like the movie as a whole. So that's one of those things for me that will, kind of always come to mind whenever thinking about the Athletics, which again is kind of just, I guess, funny in some ways to be thinking about how obviously the movie's a lot bigger than this, but them being cheap is pretty much their downfall. And that's something that's kind of been their brand for the last 2 decades or so.
Yeah, very quickly, I do have to share during that 89 World Series. So I was 9 years old, and I just returned from overseas in Sri Lanka, where my parents are from. I developed a severe case of food poisoning, and I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks as a 9-year-old, and I was watching the World Series, and of course, game was it the first game of the earthquake? And Al Michaels and the ABC losing its video and so on, and I was in the hospital watching that thing go down live. It was just absolutely crazy. And then everything that took place, of course, during the San Francisco earthquake of 1989. And the thing with Moneyball, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, they didn't really go big on the pitching. I mean, like they between Zito, Hudson, and Mulder, like they didn't focus on that. I was disappointed. But I mean, hey, we don't need to go into that. Anyway, we'll see what happens when Oakland moves to Sin City. I mean, is it a matter of time before the NBA makes it to Las Vegas as well? Time will certainly tell. But everyone, it took a really long time for the Texas Rangers to be on top of the pyramid. And after 63 years, the Texas Rangers are your World Series champions. Lily, I distinctly remember what you had mentioned during the last time we got together. And if teams are hot at the right time, good things will happen. And from barely making it into the playoffs, Texas had one of the most dominant playoff performances in recent memory. I mean, how did this happen?
I think in some ways, again, my statement in this way isn't, I think in the way that I usually refer to it, where I'm thinking maybe you're not a good team for, or you have a good start, then you have a couple of, down months. And then towards the end, maybe the last 2 weeks, last month, you start to heat up and everything is going your way up until you making the postseason. And then boom, you are putting yourself in the right spot to, get a title, win a title, or make it far. And the Rangers, it feels like I don't want to say they don't completely follow that, but part of what they did kind of follow it, where they just stayed relevant enough to stay in the race and give themselves that opportunity. And for them, it's so interesting to have at, many points having led in the AL West only to, have that be really battled out and eventually lose it to, the perennial favorite, the Astros. They still did enough to manage to make it in and slide into the playoffs. And what they did after that, though, was it seemed like that was more the spark that kind of lit the flame for them to go far and do well, where it's not usually my formula. It's not what happened. Didn't really make sense. If the Diamondbacks, though, on the other hand, are more of that team for me that had that sort of momentum, that firepower. But the Rangers, I think, were this was a very refreshing, I would say, World Series, in that, you had two teams that I think it was, I know, some more of the lower playoff or the more of the lower like World Series viewership we've had in a really long time. But what's exciting about it is just knowing that these are two teams that don't get the opportunity to do this very often. And that was something that I really enjoyed. And the Rangers, it felt like, along with the Diamondbacks, they both kind of went, hey, we're here. We got to make the most out of it. We got our shot. Let's do it. And the Rangers were sneaky about it. I do really feel like they came out of nowhere, and they were the type of team too. And this is something, I guess I did want to bring up earlier, where it's something that, a team like Oakland could easily have taken from and saying, hey, what did they do as a team? They signed two studs to, kind of get people to get in the seats, say, hey, we're going to be worth watching. We got Corey Seager, we got Marcus Semien. Come watch our games. Come watch us play. Nobody thought that was going to actually end up helping them, work out a way to win a World Series, but it happened. They managed to build around that in a way very quickly, and kind of really brought some relevancy to themselves really quickly. This is one of the thing is for me, though, is I don't know how likely they are to repeat it, considering how, the season was somewhat inconsistent. They had a lot of ups and downs, but what I did like about it is once they made it to the dance, they really put everything into it and said, we're just going to keep winning. We're going to do everything we can to just win, and get ourselves that title. And like you said, they did it in such a dominant fashion that it's almost hard to unwrap what actually happened even after all this time has passed. You are muted again, I believe.
Muted, and I realized that. And yeah, it's also this mouse here that I'm trying to get used to as well. It's not as sleek as the PC version, but Jake, speaking about momentum, one team that I thought of was the Phoenix Suns. And I don't know if you remember specifically during the bubble season. They didn't have a great season. They go to the bubble. They're 8-0, and they just ran with it, making the finals, losing to Lily's Milwaukee Bucks. But you think about what could potentially happen for next season, and Lily mentioned that ownership rolled out the Brinks truck to sign Seager and Semien. Do you think that Texas has what it takes to ride out a strong 24 campaign?
I think they do. Repeating in any sport is very hard. And if I was a betting man, which I am definitely not, but if I was, I would not bet them to repeat. But I think they'll be still sitting at the same table as some of the contenders, because you think of that lineup, which was the best lineup in the American League, they pretty much field everybody back. Plus, you had Evan Carter, who's really young and really exciting, was phenomenal in the playoffs. I think he had like a hit in every game. Definitely going to win the Gold Glove one day, probably a couple. You have him for now a full year. So, that's definitely going to help. Their pitching, I'm not sure if Drew Montgomery will come back or not. The pitching is going to be a question. Aroldis Chapman in the bullpen. But I've heard that they are interested in Josh Hader. Not sure if they're going to sign him, but I've seen a lot of people pick Hader to sign in Texas, and if they get him, that could be a really, really scary looking bullpen all of a sudden if you sign probably the best reliever in baseball right now in Josh Hader. Just the overhand lefty with the hair, very intimidating. So I think they have a shot just because that lineup, like everybody's coming back, and the only piece that might not is the back end of the bullpen, which I think they could replace. Like I said, I think they might be signing Josh Hader and Jordan Montgomery, who I think they can resign and I think they can replace just because clearly they're willing to spend money. The Texas Rangers outside of Seager and Semien basically like developed all their hitting homegrown and then spent all the money on their pitching. I think they'll have Jacob deGrom at some point next year. Will not be until late summer, possibly, but I think they'll have him at some point. I'm not sure how much Max Scherzer has left, but having him for a full year, I think will help a little bit. I definitely think he's pushing 40 years old at this point. I think he's almost 40. He's not the same pitcher, but can he be a decent middle rotation starter? I think he can at least be that. So I think they can absolutely be one of the top teams next year and definitely compete for a World Series. Will they do it? I don't know, but I think can they? I think they can.
And you got to think about what Adolis Garcia is going to bring towards next. I mean, he just seems to really get so much attention, kind of like a Randy Arozarena to some degree, especially during the World Baseball Classic there, where too bad that he did get hurt towards the end of the series. But I mean, definitely some exciting times in Arlington for sure. Maddie, very quickly, I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Diamondbacks. It's a pretty young roster, and you have to wonder if they just had everything in the going right for them. I mean, you want to talk about momentum, and as I mentioned, the Phoenix Suns. Where was the Montreal Canadiens when they made the Cup final? Of course, it was an adjusted NHL season, but hey, they did make it, and of course, they've just been irrelevant ever since. Where do you where do you think Arizona is going to be? Do you think that Torey Lovullo can rally the troops to have another strong year?
I absolutely think so. I know it's kind of heartbreaking the way they ended their season. And by the way, this is the second year in a row that a 6th seed in the National League made it all the way to the World Series. So they're 2 for 2 since the playoff expanded. And I don't think that system is ever going to change for quite some time. But as far as the Diamondbacks are concerned, Corbin Carroll, Rookie of the Year campaign. Ketel Marte had a historic streak of going 20 consecutive games in the playoffs with a hit. And you got Perdomo, and then you had Alec Thomas come up big. You had a bunch of these young players who were exciting and came up big when it mattered. Step up and make a name for themselves. And you got to remember, before the Diamondbacks made it to the playoffs as a 6th seed, they were in first place in the National League West for the first half of the year. They were in first place. And until the Dodgers or the Giants or the Padres, not the Rockies, because the Rockies are god awful at this point. But, unless one of those 3 teams gives them more ammunition and say, you know what, we see a threat coming. We need to amp up our game and step up, knowing that we just got beat and outplayed by the Diamondbacks. I think the Diamondbacks, this is their time. They're young and exciting. They have a really good manager in Torey Lovullo. Like I said, I named the roster and everything. I think management has been brilliant in putting this all together. And this is the team that believed in themselves throughout the postseason. I mean, remember, 2 years ago, they lost 110 games. They were the worst team in baseball 2 years ago. So it's really refreshing to see this rebound or turnaround, as you will, happen in Arizona. And I think they can ride the wave of momentum into next year and play really well. I mean, we saw it happen with the Phillies. I mean, the Phillies were the 6th seed last year, and they made it all the way to the NLCS. They didn't make it back to the World Series, but they were still entertaining and they were still productive. And I think that this Arizona team going forward can do really special things.
Very quickly, you mentioned Lily mentioned of Marcus Simeon, and of course, he came to Texas from Toronto, and to see Gabby Moreno do what he did, and to think that he and Gurriel was traded for Dalton Varsho. I mean, oh my God,
That was an awful trade. I didn't like it when it happened. I remember when it happened, I was like, so they gave up a guy in Gurriel who then goes who also had a good year, and a really talented guy Moreno for Dalton Varsho is like I don't even like I don't like the dude at all. He's the weirdest player. He's like the catcher, plays the outfield. He can kind of hit, but he doesn't hit for average. But he somehow plays outfield well. He's always a catcher. He's so weird, and you give him a run up for that. And the Teoscar Hernandez did not really work out either. I don't think for the Blue Jays. So those two moves kind of did them in, to be honest.
Yeah, well, for some reason, GM Ross Atkins thought something of Alejandro Kirk and Danny Jansen, and I mean, the word around here was that Mourinho was going to do some really great things, that he was going to be that next level catcher, and Varsho ended up in the 9 spot for the majority of the season. Like he, uh, who like that is a major hole to get out of, and definitely some pressure for the Blue Jays to do well for the 24 season. And speaking of which, heading to the 24 season, of course, who knows what's going to happen, but Jake, in terms of the Mets, it seems that the big news is whether Pete Alonso is going to stick around. If I caught that he has 1 year left on his contract, and of course he's a big name player with a lot of power, and I mean Steve Cohen does have the cash to sign him. I mean, is this like Mookie Betts all over again, where Boston for whatever reason trades Betts, and could the same thing happen with Alonso? I mean, do you see him coming to New York for next year?
Yes, he will definitely be in a Mets uniform. If they trade Pete Alonso, I am driving to Steve Cohen's mansion and I'm going to throw a baseball at it. You cannot trade Pete Alonso. The Mets have had so many great players slip through their fingers year after year after year. They finally have an owner that is willing to spend the money. So hypothetically, if he gets to free agency next year, they have the money to re-sign him. If the Will Punn's still on the team, I would say extend him yesterday because they will not be able to afford him when he hits the market. But now that they have Cohen, who's willing to spend the money, I'm not as nervous to say no. At the very least, they won't be outbid for him. So, but you cannot trade the guy. The guy does everything for you. Off the field, he doesn't cause any issues. Every year, he goes out there, gives you 35, 40, 45 home runs, 95, 100, 110 RBIs. Every night he goes out there. The dude's a stud. You cannot trade him. I would extend him. Personally, I'm not sure if it's going to happen because he just hired Scott Boras as his agent, and Boras clients usually don't like to be extended just because Boras knows he can get his guy his money because he's very good at what he does. I think that's why Alonso hired Boras to try to get the best deal possible. And if he doesn't like and the extension offer he gets from the Mets, I'm sure he's confident in his skills. He figures let him go out there, have another kill year, and only increase the price. But no, he will not be getting traded. He's not going. I know there was rumors he might be going to Milwaukee. Not happen. Not going to the Cubs. Although I know they're saying for Christopher Morel, and I love Christopher Morel, great player, but not happening. Absolutely not. He will be a Met next year, and he will be a Met in 2025.
What do you think Edwin Diaz is going to do when he comes back? I mean, obviously he was out for the entire season because of a freak injury that happened at the World Baseball Classic. If everything goes and if let's say they are status quo, like in terms of the bullpen, like how much of a difference maker is a guy like Diaz, and is there any confidence the fact that after missing an entire year that he could come back to the form that he did have in 22, I suppose?
I think he'll be pretty much the same. I mean, to ask him to do exactly what he did in 2022 is not fair because that was an historic year for Edwin Diaz. but I have no doubt in my mind that he can still be a dominant closer and one of the best relievers in baseball. Obviously he had a bit of a weird career. In Seattle, he was down. When it comes to the Mets, his first year, he was horrible. Then he got a little better each year, but then you're like, really? As much they gave up Jared Kelenic for him, is this really the guy we got? Then he finally broke out 2 years ago and had the really unfortunate injury last year, which basically killed the Mets season before it even started. But I have no doubt that he'll be the same lights out closer this year that he was in 2022.
Maddie, what's the word in at the Bronx? I mean, Brian Cashman did have some interesting comments regarding Giancarlo Stanton, and I'm sure that's what you were referring to when we got together this in the beginning here. I mean, Cashman does have a point. I mean, Stanton is like a fraction of what he was, and he's owed what, close to $100 million.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm with Cashman, but and I mean, did he have the guts to say what he said, or was it stupidity?
Well, see, here's the thing. What Brian Cashman said is true. It's true, but here's the problem. You don't say that to the New York media. You don't throw Giancarlo Stanton under the bus like that to the media of New York, who's going to take that story, that quote, and publish it in newspapers, online articles. It's going to be all over the place now. And the fans of New York are not going to be happy about this because Brian Cashman, while he was correct, really shouldn't be saying stuff like that and throwing players under the bus. And also, it's not going to attract free agents. It's not going to attract Cody Bellinger to come there. It's not going to attract Juan Soto to go there if they say, "Oh, this general manager is throwing his players under the bus because of injuries." Like, it's not really.
But to play devil's advocate here, Maddie, I mean, what else can he really say? And I don't know if I'm just being unrealistic here, but if I was a free agent and I heard Brian Cashman say all these glorious things. Oh, Giancarlo Stanton is working hard in the gym. He's going to come back. He's going to be stronger than ever. Free agents are not going to buy that. And I mean, the reality is he had under the Mendoza line. And yeah, sure, the New York media is what it is. But I mean, he could have been in Pittsburgh. And I mean, I think that kind of honesty and transparency, I mean, sure, for a fan, it's refreshing, but maybe a free agent would appreciate it more.
I think I'm probably one of those type of guys that just doesn't like the hard nosed approach or something along those lines, because I feel like throwing one of your players under the bus is just not the ideal way to go. And sometimes this is something our parents have told us a lot. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. That's something that can kind of be interpreted here. But again, like, I mean, you pick and choose how you want to interpret what Brian Cashman said. But imagine how Giancarlo Stanton feels about his own general manager throwing him under the bus. And we're paying this guy millions of dollars to play for us, and he's constantly on the IR. And yes, it's true. Maybe it's a kick in the rear to Giancarlo Stanton. I don't know. But he needs to wake up. And, this is probably a wake-up call.
Well, very well could be. It's just, I guess the question is, how much is left in the tank? Lily, I mean, of course, the Brewers did finish in first in the Central, and it just seemed to be another ho-hum off season, or maybe it wasn't. I mean, of course, Craig Counsell did have a long tenure as manager. But I mean, getting to the team, like, is there anything with regards to the roster itself where you think that I guess Milwaukee needs to focus on? Or, I mean, hey, they did make it in two top spot in the Central, but of course the competition is what it is. With regards to the Brewers, like what should they focus team wise? We'll definitely get to Counsell in a moment.
I think they're in a really tough spot right now. And that's, a really easy statement to say. But I truthfully don't know what the right thing is for them to target because I don't know what their plan is for this upcoming season. I think it kind of depends on where they go. Right now, I would say if they are still going to try to give things a shot and try to be a competitive team that wants to win the NL Central, make the playoffs, potentially do well, I think that they really need to find their power bats and find guys who are going to really get in there and execute in big moments. But early on, one of the guys that had done this for at least half a season was Mark Canha, and they already traded him. He was somebody that they already dished out for a pitching prospect. And now we have the news today that they non-tendered Rowdy Tellez and Brandon Woodruff, which, puts you in a situation that potentially can change the whole trajectory of what your franchise is going to look like right now. They, of course, said that they, would be interested in bringing him back at some point if that ever became a possibility. But at the same time, it means that they weren't able to find what they wanted here. And I don't want to lose him. I would love if they could somehow find a deal that would be, friendly for him to want to stay. But at the same time, I wouldn't blame him for not wanting to come back because they kind of blindsided him saying, we couldn't find value for you because you're injured and we don't know if we can hold on to you for this amount of time. So I think there's a chance they enter full rebuild mode, which I really do not want to see. The only consolation for me is that rebuilds seem to not be the same as they used to, where we're seeing the turnaround happen a lot faster, where we noticed it already with the Orioles, and I'd say the Diamondbacks didn't really go full rebuild, but I guess the closest thing is like the Orioles and what they've done in the past like couple years is kind of, it leaves you to feel a little bit better about the opportunity or the chance that you might just start up again and figure it out. But
It took a while. It took a while for Baltimore, though. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
sure, they made the wild card in 15, I guess. And
I think my only thing with them is that the owners made it seem like, I guess, or front office made it seem like they were still going to be in a rebuild for like 3 more years, 3 or 4. Like it seemed, and that was probably like 1 or 2 years ago. They made it seem like things weren't really going to change anytime soon. So that's my kind of, I guess, like frame of reference. But very correct with that they haven't had that success in recent memory. But I think we're seeing things look different. I guess it does depend if you're going full rebuild, half rebuild, partial, but they're, again, new management, entering just a different era of baseball. But I think they just had the stadium contract renewed to be there through 2050, which is great. And I think starting that note off on a potential rebuild and dropping all the guys that mean something to the team is going to be really harmful. Burns has had no discussions for an extension. So part of me is like, yeah, maybe continue to look for pitching, but they develop pitching well. That's something at least that's of comfort. I think that if they aren't rebuilding, they need to try to find their power bats, but at the same time, those are lurking in AAA and AA and just in their farm system as a whole with Jackson Chourio, potentially coming up next year or in the next few years, we'll see, as well as guys like Tyler Black and obviously Sal Frelick came up, Garrett Mitchell. They have a really young, healthy core, which is, what you want to see. And they have a really great group of guys and other pitchers too, like Gasser and a few others that I'm, pretty keen on. But I really don't know what to tell them to target.
so I mean, like,
because
you don't like I mean, with your obviously with what you said of getting hot at the right time, and yeah, sure, maybe it's a lot easier said than done, but because of where they are playing and the events that have taken place this past postseason, that you still think that a rebuild should happen?
I don't think it necessarily should happen. I think it's the most likely option right now, especially with Burns, Adames, and a handful of others going to be either entering free agency next season potentially. It feels like we have maybe one shot right now to get it right. But like obviously too, bringing in Jake Bowers isn't going to probably do a whole hell of a lot for their team. We'll see. But it feels like if they want to make it happen, they need to try to do anything they can to make it happen now. And with the way they've been spending, I just don't see Matt Arnold jumping into the free agency pool and grabbing these big impact guys. That is also too just never been the Brewers' MO. That's never how they've made anything happen. Maybe, you know, by trades with like cash considerations, but they don't spend. That's just the type of team they are. And for me, it just I'm prepping myself for a potential rebuild, but what I would love to see happen is maybe pick up a good bat, even if he's a cheap bat, just pick somebody up who's going to make an impact and say, hey, we have Contreras, who's, you know, continuing to do well. Yelich had a bounce back year. We have potentially one more season of Corbin Burns and Willie Adames. Freddie Peralta's in his prime. Let's just do what we can. I would love to see that happen and have a story like the Diamondbacks, or not necessarily the Rangers, but like, you know, just making things happen and making things work. It felt like last season that's actually a lot of what it was going on, but at the same time they had the three-headed monster. They were really, you know, able to do a lot, even with Woodruff being injured for half the season. It's just very hard for me to want to buy into whatever they're doing, because I just don't want to get my hopes and dreams crushed when, you know, in this city the Cubbies seem to be doing everything they possibly can to build a winning franchise. And I know we're going to be getting into Counsell, but they have what he said was a, quote, healthy organization with a, you know, a lot going for them.
Yeah, well, we might as well get into it right now. And of course, Craig Counsell has hit the jackpot, especially in a manager sense, for signing a 5-year deal with the Chicago Cubs. And you know, of course, for Brewers Nation and Lily especially, this did sound like a really big surprise.
Yeah, it hit really. I mean, for me, I didn't think he was going to be moving whatsoever. I really expected that he was going to stick around or take some time off and just enjoy not managing for a bit. And to me, what it sounds like is the Cubs made him an insane offer. He liked what he heard, liked hearing about what the organization was like, how Jed Hoyer treats the organization, his outlook, and he didn't even want an offer from the Mets, didn't even want an offer from the Brewers, just wanted to say, hey, I'm going to come to Chicago, because I think it hit the point that probably too, Hoyer said, I will counter offer anything. I do not care. We want you here. And I think that was enough for Counsell, knowing that already with the Cubs offer was probably enough to, you know, change what managers are going to get paid from here on out. And he said, let's just do it. But for me, it really felt, when I woke up and saw the news, my mom texted me an article from MLB.com, and I thought it was a joke, but I realized, I was like, well, it can't be a joke because this is quite literally MLB.com.
Sure.
This is crazy. And the thing that was just crazy for me is, again, working for the network for the Cubs and just being like, how could this happen? This feels like a personal attack, that this would, you know, happen to me, the Brewers fan at the office. What's going on? But I, like a lot of, I think,
Were they
Wisconsinites,
gentle? Were they gentle to you, Lily?
somebody did give me a hug. And a lot of people, you know, waited a day to ask me how I was doing, because it's quite the bombshell to deal with it. Because I think too, it'd be like it's any Packers player going to the Bears. It's Brett Favre going to the Vikings. It's just that blow that hurts like nothing else. And
I mean, I thought it was Johnny Damon to the Yankees.
yeah, everybody has their, you know, like association with it. We talked about that even too at the office, about, you know, all these different Hulk Hogan to, was NWO? Is that right?
NWO.
Yep, that was the big one.
Wow.
That was a big one. So like for me, it's that type of thing. And it's even though I do work, you know, near to the Cubs, for me as a Wisconsinite, that's tough. It's really hard. And as a Brewers fan to say, I'll put that aside. I'll do what I can to make the Cubs, support the Cubs. But for a homegrown guy from Whitefish Bay to leave and join the Cubs and basically say, I don't really understand. I think I haven't damaged anything with the community. I think that they should understand I have good relationship with everybody, when clearly he doesn't. And it feels like he doesn't see the bigger picture. And even too, in his last press conference with the Cubs, he said it feels good to wear a Cubs jersey. It's the right time to be a Cub. And those are all really hard things to hear. I also at the same time respect him getting his bag and making money, because like anybody in that position, that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to make that type of money. I can't blame him, but it doesn't make it hurt any less. And it's going to sting. I think some people are like, they don't want to see him get booed the next time he's in Milwaukee. I say to hell with that. I say boo the man. He knows what he's expecting. Anything it takes for him to actually understand what hurt he caused the city of Milwaukee, the state of Wisconsin, Milwaukee Brewers fans as a whole. I think it just doesn't seem to have clicked with him yet how much he, hurt everybody. But at the same time, I think after they hired Murphy and Ricky Weeks, I feel better now just knowing that there's a future in place. But there's a sort of fire in my heart now that's just waiting for the Brewers to beat the Cubs next and just see exactly what that feels like. But it's just otherworldly. It really feels otherworldly to me still.
Well, you know what? I know what it feels like. I mean, John Farrell essentially quit on the Jays and then signed with the Red Sox and did pretty well, winning a World Series with the Bo Sox. I mean, Jake, why do you think Craig Counsell? I mean, it's the Chicago Cubs. They could have the pick of the litter. I mean, was it a dig at Milwaukee? I mean, is there a hidden agenda, or is it just simply Craig Counsell has a certain pedigree that any MLB team would like? What do you think?
I think Counsell is a great manager. I think he's a very good manager. The role of the manager has unfortunately been really reduced in today's MLB. Pretty much everything now is kind of done upstairs by only these analytical people, which I don't always agree with. So I think there's not that many really true great in-game managers in today's game, and I think Counsell was one of them. So if you have a chance to get your hands on one, I do think you should take that opportunity. I like David Ross, who was the previous manager, of course. He was always very classy. He, of course, he had a nice career. He finished it off with the Cubs in 2016. He had that, the very, very memorable campaign. Winning a World Series in 2016, helping them win the World Series, break that very, very long curse. And he was always
The home
a
run as well.
manager, but I never thought he was. Yes, big home run in that series.
Sure.
But I thought he was a respectable manager, but I never thought he was anything special. In fact, people always talked about him as if he was this great manager. He wasn't the worst manager in the league, but he was just kind of like a middle of the road manager. Counsell was an upgrade. It was very weird how it happened because when the Mets announced they hired Carlos Mendoza, at first I was pissed. I was like, wait, they chose Mendoza over Counsell? It doesn't make any sense. Especially since they hired David Stearns as the president of baseball operations. And then I heard, he's not going back to Milwaukee either. So I'm like, wait a minute. He's not taking the Mets job, and he's not going back to Milwaukee. So I was like, is he taking years off? Which he said a year or two ago that was his plan. For whatever reason, he changed his mind once the season ended. Maybe, I don't know if it was managing the playoffs, coming up short. He still maybe get motivated. I don't know. I'm not. Only he knows that. And then it came out, he's going to the Cubs. I was like, wait. I was like, first of all, I guess David Ross is fired. I guess. Obviously, normally you announce the manager, previous guy is fired, then you hire a guy. So they basically well, what did I do? Call David Ross, said, we're hiring for a Counsell, you're out of a job. I guess that's what they did. But yeah, he got his bag. I do think he's an upgrade over David Ross. And the Cubs, bit of a collapse this year. Kind of below short, they had a bit of a weird season. Coming in, they were kind of like middle of the road. They struggled for a while. It looked like they were going to sell the deadline. Then they got hot, so they stood pat. I think they did like a small buy. They went and got somebody,
Candelaria.
and looked like they're. That's right. They went and got Cardinale, who had a nice year for the Cubs and between Detroit and Chicago, and looked like they were going to get in, and then September hit, and they kind of fell apart and came up a little short. But now with Counsell there, they got a nice little core. They seem to be in a position to possibly be very aggressive on the free agent market. I do think Counsell will help because he's a very good manager. He had a lot of success in Milwaukee. He made the playoffs like 5 of the last 6 years. But yeah, I think he chose the Cubs because they gave him a really good price, and I think he just likes the organization overall.
I think another thing there too is that he talked about is part of it is the proximity, being close to Milwaukee still. Probably, I think they're going to get a place in Chicago, but you're still close enough to home that, you don't have to sell your house. Your kids can still stay at the same school. That's a huge thing too for his daughters. One of the things too that Jed Hoyer said is he felt like David Ross left wins on the table over the past couple seasons, especially last season, especially with bullpen mismanagement, the way he kind of handled things. And I think that obviously I had to listen to this press conference quite a bit. So I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the statements that were said there. And another one too, that I think actually this played a factor in why he didn't want to stay in Milwaukee nor go to New York. He did also say though on November 1st, he was getting ready to go on a flight to New York. But he decided to talk with Hoyer. One of the things though is that he said, for the past 2 seasons, he's been thinking about leaving or doing something else. And part of a lot of conjecture, which obviously too, this is just a theory, nobody knows, is that 2 seasons ago is when they traded Josh Hader. And, when they were in the midst of doing really well, performing really well as a team, and that completely blindsided everybody. And I think there's some conjecture that might have been the moment that he went, I don't know if I want to stay here and don't want to be part of this don't want to deal with this front office anymore. Don't know if I need to be involved in it. And Matt Arnold, I believe, was part of the organization already at that point. And David Stearns obviously was, the guy who's the ringleader for that. There is part of me that wonders if he then, after hearing about what the Cubs are going to offer, if he went, yeah, I don't know if I want to go back to work with David Stearns, even though that's what a lot of people thought. Which obviously too, complete conjecture, but it's something for me that I do think there's a possibility there that could have been a big part of things.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. I do think that one of them kind of felt like the other was kind of slutting them. I'm not sure who felt which. That's actually a really good point, Lloyd. I never even thought of that until you said that. That Hader trade. I remember the press conference right after it happened. Devin Williams, who of course is their star reliever, and he was the 8th inning guy, so he took over as the closer. So he was very, very emotional. And it may have been a combination of like, all right, it's a great opportunity for him. Now he can close, but also like he was very emotional and very sad that Hader was gone. Like you said, they were playing good baseball. They were right there in the mix. I forget if they were in first place or, that division wasn't great that year. So but they were like right in the thick of a playoff race, and you trade arguably the best reliever in baseball. Like that couldn't have gone over well in the locker room. So maybe Counsell was like, I don't want to do this again. And some of the Counsell's comments like throughout the whole process of like his free agency, like, oh, if Milwaukee matches any offer, I'll go back. I think Stearns kind of felt like, I worked with you for X amount of years. We had a good amount of success together. And I think the lack and just, I think Stearns thought this is going to be a home run. I'm going to come in. I'm going to get Counsell my manager. The fans are going to be very happy. And then we'll go to work in free agency. And I just think there's the hesitation of Counsell kind of maybe it frustrates Stearns, possibly. and then clearly he wanted to be very highly paid, and maybe Stearns didn't want to do that. The Mets have never been an organization that spends a ton on their manager. That was also Steve Cohen also is a completely different owner. He's much more aggressive than the previous ownership under the Wilpons, so I'm not sure how much that still stands true with Steve Cohen's ownership, but I know the Mets offer was not really that close to the Cubs, and Counsell really didn't even take a look at it, like you said, Lily. So I think they both kind of maybe felt a little slighted. So maybe their relationship wasn't as great as we thought. But yeah, there was, I think, something between them. What definitely was a reason why he didn't choose New York and he ended up going to the Cubs.
Well, I guess talking about whether it was Ross leaving wins on the table and so on, and like how much like what is the relevancy of a manager these days in Major League Baseball, because analytics are what they are, and I mean, obviously, it's very evident when well, especially when it comes to pitching and pulling a pitcher after only a handful of innings. I mean, the Blue Jays and John Schneider, Pete Walker had a great level of criticism during the second play-in game there with Minnesota. They pulled Barrios in after 3 innings. And I mean, nobody understood why. And I mean, with management and I mean, yeah, sure, the position players, that's another story. But for the most part, which 8 other guys you're putting out there. But Maddie, I guess what the question is now, is this a sign of things to come with regards to the amount of money managers and head coaches get paid these days? Because at 5 years and $40 million, Counsell is pretty much doubling the salaries of especially major league managers within baseball. And to take it from other sports, the big signing in terms of a coaching aspect was Monty Williams with the Detroit Pistons. Do you think that ownership from whichever team is actually going to spend this kind of money for a manager?
Well, managers definitely have gained value in some way, shape, or form as years have progressed, because they're the ones making the decisions that translate to what happens in game. Money is always what's going to be the driving factor to get a lot of these people to come in. I mean, if you look at other sports like John Gruden, for instance, with the Raiders, Mark Davis, the owner, threw I think $10 million a year at him to coach the Raiders. So that was a record for a head coach in the NFL. But to answer the question about money and managers in Major League Baseball and other sports in general, this might be the trend that we see, because money, 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 that's how businesses are run. This is how businesses operate. They want to make the most of what they can, and sometimes you gotta dig your wallet out and just pay the best possible people out there in order to get what you want. Like I said, it's a cost-heavy thing, but it's going to be happening like that. And Craig Counsell was possibly the best commodity manager out there as far as story goes. The Mets, I felt like the way they fired Buck Showalter was a tragedy. They really shouldn't have fired him the way they did. And I was really surprised because they signed with the Cubs, because I felt like the Cubs were in a good position. I know they just barely missed out on making the playoffs. I know, like they said, David Ross left a couple wins out that they should have taken. They should have been in the playoffs ahead of the Diamondbacks if they had not shot themselves in the foot late in the year. But you also got to realize David Ross, as much as we praise his enthusiasm and his love for the game and the fact that he's a former World Series champion with the Cubs, he brought them their first World Series in over 100 years. He just wasn't getting the job done. And sometimes when you don't get the job done, you're not going to get that payday. And Craig Counsell, what he did with the Brewers, yeah, they fell short in the playoffs with the Diamondbacks. But at the end of the day, he got this team in position to succeed. And they got in the playoffs in what was the worst division of baseball. But still, it bears repeating that money is a factor in how to get someone there. He's not going to take offers from the Mets. He's not going to take offers from any other organization. You might as well just go with whatever your gut tells you. And sometimes location helps too, but money is going to be a factor moving forward. And you're going to see astronomical numbers for people's paychecks go up for managers.
I just wonder what that exactly means. Counsell did what he did with Milwaukee. I mean, what exactly did he do? Lily, I mean, I'm sure that you could chime
Yeah.
in specifically, but for a guy like myself who didn't see the Brewers as much, of course, being in the National League amongst other reasons, I mean, how much of a difference maker is Craig Counsell?
Huge. I think he is a remarkable difference maker on a team. And the thing that, so first of all, I think the way he manages, I think he deserves to get paid. He really puts everything into it. He thinks about every move in a way that I think a lot of managers would like to say they do, but I think he's kind of on a different level with the way his brain works and how he manages a team. One of the moments that they talked about a lot is Canna hit a grand slam before the ball even hit the ground. The way he saw it go off the bat, he went to the bullpen phone to call them, obviously to change his plans about who should be warming up now, what their plan should be. He is always thinking about the next move, the next 5 moves, the next 10 games. He always thinks about everything, I think, in a way we don't always see. What he did as a manager for Milwaukee is bring back some relevancy. Before he was managing, Ron Renicky really, wasn't doing a whole hell of a lot for them. You'd go to Brewers games for fun because it was just something to do. It was a day trip for me to go down to Milwaukee, go see a game. If they won, cool, but they probably weren't going to win. And what happened was, even though he this too, I think he had a lot of snubs with never getting manager of the year. That's, a whole different story. And some people were saying too, why are you paying so much for him when he never got manager of the year? And I think he's been the best manager for the past 3-4 years. It's just that there's been a guy better each of those years. Not necessarily that's been better for all those years, just, more deserving of that award whenever it happens. And it's, in the way that Mike Trout, best player of baseball, even if whatever's happened, even though he did mostly win MVPs. I think with Counsell, he, really changed this to a Milwaukee brand that even though they're not spending money, they're successful. They're going to the playoffs, the postseason. They might not win a lot in the postseason, but getting a team to that point that hasn't had that type of success ever and saying we're going to the playoffs, 4 out of the last 5 years, 5 out of the last 6 years, that type of thing is crazy. That is crazy to be able to turn around and do that in such a short period of time and produce a winning franchise in a way that, they might not have under a different coach. So I think he is really just one of those guys, but I worry about the possibility of him coming to Chicago and just falling completely flat and not being able to do anything there. He said it himself. He said he didn't really know much about the Cubs franchise or the team, and that's important. Obviously he's going to learn. He's the type of guy that can learn, but you're entering in from, that guy we hated, and now you're our manager and we're supposed to, really listen and figure this out. I think it can happen. I think he's the right guy for that, but I think he is a really special just type of manager who made Milwaukee relevant in the baseball scene. And I think there were a lot of times where he actually didn't manage pitching very well. He'd pull guys too early because that was the type of thing he did. But later in his career, he started leaving guys out there for a lot longer, giving them their chance to go through. Early in his career, he would have never let Burns stay in for 8 innings, but he started changing that way. But I do think, that's the hard part about him leaving Milwaukee, is that you lose some of that relevancy. But the Cubs, this is, I think, kind of a hot take. David Ross is not the right manager for the Cubs. I think maybe for at least the last year. You could even argue the last 2 years, where I think he made a decent lineup mediocre, and he made a really good, I'll say really good, kind of loosely, with Cody Bellinger, Dansby Swanson underperforming a little bit on offense, but he made a good lineup subpar. Miles Mastrobuoni was starting so many games when that should have never been the case, and he mismanaged a lot. I don't think he was the right manager for that organization, where you bring in a guy like Craig Counsell. He's a big boy. he's, I think, ready to take on a team like the Cubs.
So, okay, putting you on the spot, uh, how much of an improvement is the Cubs going to make? I mean, yeah, sure, you have free agency to think about, and anything can happen. But Cubs were just barely over 500. So you know, and yeah, sure, maybe it may take a year or two, but is Craig Counsell going to be the difference maker for Chicago to uh, get to 100 wins in an upcoming year?
I think my biggest issue with the Cubs this past season is just inconsistent. They just never looked like the same team from game to game, where they would blow out teams and get 10 runs, 12 runs, and absolutely annihilate them, and the next day struggle. Which, of course, too, sometimes it's just like a thing that happens in baseball where you score a lot and then the next day you don't. But that was just what they looked like all the time. Every day it looked like one day they would be the best team in the world who was just hot, everything was going right, to a team that couldn't help but strike out, ground out into double plays, and just look terrible. And I think what he can bring in there is just consistency and just finding a way to make a team. Maybe again, they could have a similar record, but it might just make more sense in the way it happens. They might just look better. I think they're going to look a little bit more polished. I think they're going to look a little bit more put together. And it's going to seem like, I think the moves he makes are going to feel intentional in a way that they might not have before. I think the question that does get raised a lot, though, is people also like to bring up, why did you start Jesse Winker in the postseason, in your first game in the NLDS? Why would you do that? Those are, weird choices, and I think he makes them sometimes, but he is somebody who I think is just more intentional in a way that you don't see from somebody like David Ross, who just doesn't have that type of experience or pedigree like Counsell had.
Well, what kind of legacy will Craig Counsell have with the Chicago Cubs? I mean, would it be so much more better than what he did accomplish in Milwaukee? And it definitely did seem that he did have a lot of success, especially amongst Brewers fans like yourself, Lily. But is he going to take it to the next level? And
my one thing we'll say is, I think if he doesn't win a title, he won't. I think he needs a title in Chicago to have a legacy there.
Well,
otherwise, I think.
No, especially with that kind of salary as well. And also the fact that there is a great possibility of free agents going to Chicago, and especially the Cubbies. But if you guys remember correctly, and I know you do, Bill Belichick didn't really have much of a history before he got to New England, and things have definitely changed. I mean, from the 6 Super Bowls that Bill Belichick won, things are just completely fallen off the rails in New England. And the big talk is if Bill Belichick is going to make it through this season. Lily, with everything that you spoke about with regards to Craig Counsell, you are a football fan as well. And, should or even can New England fire Bill Belichick in the middle of a season?
I don't think they'll fire him in the middle of a season, but I don't know as much about the Patriots as I possibly could in terms of the way that they tend to run their organization in that regard. But I think simply out of respect, they're not going to fire him in the middle of a season just because of what he's done for them, what he's been. But I think we could see that change, as soon as it hits the postseason for them, the off season. My thing is, for him, what's kind of been, I think, showing is that he really just should have been done once Brady was gone. He really just should have said, throwing my towel, I'm going to call it quits and just ride off into the sunset, because I think he's the type of guy too, where right now he's kind of changing his whole legacy by underperforming this much and having a team that's underperforming this much. And of course too, sometimes that is the personnel. That's the guys you have, your players. But it all gets turned back on you as the coach for
But I mean, could the
it
same
not
thing
happening.
could the same thing potentially could have been said about Greg Popovich? I mean, here's a guy who was winning all these championships, and after their big three retired, and Kawhi Leonard gets traded, Greg Popovich was essentially in the basement of the league, and now you could say that things are potentially happening with uh, Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio. I mean, yeah, sure, there's a lot of components to make a strong football team, but couldn't the same thing happen with Bill Belichick potentially? I mean, yeah, sure, this season's a wash, but I mean, hey, let's say that they get a top draft pick. Believe they still have their first round pick. Uh, and this kid, is it Caleb Williams? Yeah, that he apparently is supposed to be the second coming of Christ. So Jake disagrees. Jake, what do you think?
All right, two things. First of all, I do think Caleb Williams is a great talent and will be a great player, but God, he's being overhyped. People are saying this guy. People are saying this guy is Patrick Mahomes. He is not. Okay, being extremely overhyped. First of all, these USC quarterbacks never work out. Sam Darnold, Matt Barkley, go down the list. The only one who had any sort of success was Carson Palmer, was a good quarterback. Injuries kind of killed him, but overall he had a good career. But Sam Darnold was a flop. Matt Barkley was a flop. Matt Leinart was a flop. Mark Sanchez was a flop. Caleb is probably the most talented out of all of them, I would say. And I think he's number one pick in this draft, but I think people are saying he's like the next Mahomes. That really worries me. Also, like, the dude wants part ownership of the team he drafts. He wants to get drafted. Like, dude, shut up. Okay, shut up and finish your college career, you stupid idiot. Okay, that's one of the most stupid and moronic things I have ever heard. The dude's like the same age as me, and he wants part ownership of the team he plays for. I'm trying to apply to NBC Sports for an internship. In the little message you leave, I did not leave I want to be part owner of NBC Sports. Maybe I should try it. I mean, it's making Caleb
Never know.
Maybe you never know. Maybe I should try it. But going back to Bill, Randy, you mentioned that because the same thing you said about Greg Popovich. I think this is a tough example because you got to remember, you said maybe the personnel isn't there. You got to remember, Bill's also the GM there. He built this team. This is his football team. So you're like, all right, well, yes, the team is not good. The team is terrible. Mac Jones is awful. They can't run the ball. They can't block. The receivers suck. They can't get any separation. The defense is depleted. They can't get pressure on the quarterback. They can't cover. Their secondary is depleted. But guess what? Bill built this team. He's the GM.
But everything else seems to be working just fine in New England.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, at least their fans are keeping their mouth shut. That's one thing. But with Bill, I agree with Louis. I don't think he goes mid-season just because he has won 6 Super Bowls for the team. He's been there a long time, and also at this point, I feel like they might as well just go 4-13 and get a high pick so they can draft a good quarterback. Honestly, firing him.
Not to play devil's advocate on purpose, but I mean, he does seem to do something right. I mean, 6 Super Bowls is not a fluke. Isn't it possible that maybe 1 or 2 years could be a lemon, and that New England and their scouting and so on could turn something around and maybe draft somebody really solid at 199 like they did Tom Brady?
Look, anything is possible, and the Patriots obviously have had a lot of success, but also Bill has done an awful job of drafting recently. How many misses has this guy had? Reached on Cole Strange. Mac Jones was a flop. Just the Juju Smith-Schuster contract was just awful. He's just had miss after miss after miss after miss. And to me, the guy cannot be the GM next year. And there is no circumstance where Bill Belichick can be the GM next year. And if Kraft tells him you're not the GM anymore, you can't just keep him on as coach. You just can't do it. It just cannot be done. This is not the same Patriots team that has this great quarterback and is built, really well with, a deep running back room and big receivers all over the field, a great O-line and a great defense. It's not the same team. Post Tom Brady it's been very, very porous, to be honest. And it's time for a new era of Patriots football. I think it's time for Bill to step away. I think that will happen.
It definitely seems that looks to be the case. I mean, 2-8 doesn't really get you a lot of guarantees that you're going to survive for the upcoming season. So, very quickly, guys, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I, we were in London and in Paris, and we saw what the NFL and the appetite for NFL football. I mean, I have to say that, I mean, cat's out of the bag. I am not overly enthralled in the NFL like I am in other sports, and was very, very surprised to see the amount of Jacksonville Jaguar fans that were in London, England, but such were the case. Near my hotel, the Buffalo Bills fans had claimed a bar as the go-to place for the Bills game when they were in London. They're in Frankfurt for games over there. And I was kind of intrigued at how the NFL is putting a lot of resources into Europe. And I mean, yeah, sure, if there is a league that could cross the pond and especially play in, whether it be England or Germany, or it could certainly be the NFL. But is it realistic? I mean, for this London team to eventually play a team in California, I mean, that's a bit of a hike. Maddie, do you think that the NFL should focus in Europe? Because I mean, and I don't really know if there's any viable cities in the United States, but I mean, you think about Mexico City, and personally, I don't really think that the NFL will work in Canada. And we could maybe get into that in a moment. But what do you think about the NFL in Europe, Matt?
Well, it's a hassle for people, for me, because the games are at 9:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. That's the only hassle for people in America. But other than that, like, I love one of the things I praise Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, for is his ability to want to expand fandom for the game across the world. He did it in Germany. He's done it in the UK. He's going to do it possibly in France. There'll probably be France games coming soon. Ultimately, you just want to you want to give a good presentation of your product to people across the world and get them into it. And to also say that, to counter that, there is a Canadian Football League. So there is football representation in Canada.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll tell you right now, especially in the city of Toronto, the Canadian Football League is so invisible. Like the CFL and the Toronto Argonauts, it was one of the first leagues to welcome fans back after COVID. And BMO Field was roughly a 25,000 seat stadium for football. Maybe, probably about 25 for football. And they drew like less than 10,000. And like American football, it sucks in Toronto. Maddie, please go ahead.
Okay. But still, like, branding yourself, branding your product, promoting it the way you have, getting people involved, it just really brings people together. And I know people are not going to want to hear this. Football has become number one in a lot of people's eyes as years have gone by. It used to be baseball at the top, and now football has kind of surpassed it, if not taken over completely by a large margin. So obviously, if something's very popular, they're going to want to see it. And I know some people in other countries will say, well, football is the best sport. They probably mean soccer, with the FIFA World Cup and, the Euro. Those are big popular in European countries as well. But American football is something that is hardly seen or recognized in the European continent, or
anywhere outside of the US.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I am convinced that Tom Brady could walk, maybe not so much Tom Brady, but Patrick Mahomes, I am certain he could walk through the Champs-Elysees in Paris and not get recognized.
Yeah, and the reason why is because they're still working the kinks out with promoting everything. But still, like you're seeing it in the UK, that's a good start. You're starting to have it in Germany. That's a great start. Like it's the fact that we're starting to see it more in other countries. I think that we'll see it happen in France. I mean, France is having the Olympics this upcoming year, and then eventually in 2028 they're going to have flag football. I think once that happens in 2028 with flag football, that's going to get the well-known namesake of football, professional football, off the ground because
Do you guys think flag football will elevate the profile of football altogether? I mean, ugh.
It could help.
Really? You think so?
I mean, I don't see why not. I don't think it might not be astronomical, but it's in the same way too. After the games, like every single year, you can't tell me like after the winter games that the interest in curling doesn't uptick and people looking for curling clubs or trying to find spaces to do that. Ice skating doesn't uptick. All these different things. And like I think it happens too with like the Winter Olympic or the Summer Olympics. Like I remember being a kid and instantly thinking like, man, I want to be a swimmer. I want to be like Michael Phelps or like, crazy or gymnastics, like crazy things like that. And obviously too, those are all kind of mainstays, popular things, at least like in the US, like swim team, gymnastics. My sister was a huge gymnast and like all those different things like that. I think there's a chance. I really don't see why not. Hell, even after they introduced skateboarding, this past Olympics was that Rio? Was Rio? No, not
no,
Rio.
I think it was in Japan.
Yeah, I don't
So
know why I can't. I don't know why I can't think of where the last Olympics were. Or was that Tokyo?
Well,
Yeah.
no. Last Olympics were Tokyo. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, that's
but
what I was thinking.
nobody was allowed to go.
Yeah, but even so, that with like skateboarding, I was like, that's really cool, and I'm sure too. Like, I think the introduction and spotlight of new events like that is obviously gonna bring some attention to it, and I think we'll see. Especially, I think a lot of times too, it just creates a lot of national pride, like wanting to see your country do well in those events. So you never know if it is a hit. I think that makes a big impact, but I mean, I truthfully don't see why not. I don't see why it couldn't.
I gotta say though, Lily, especially when it comes to hockey, I don't see any needle being moved after professionals started going into the Olympics in 1998. Because in 98, Canada or the US didn't make it to the gold medal game.
Yeah.
And in 2002, Canada and US did. And in 2010, the unfortunate part, if you want to call it that, is that both of those Olympics were in North America. 2002 was in Salt Lake, 2010 was in Vancouver.
Mhm.
And and I'm not sure how versed you are in hockey, but in terms of internationally, I mean, I think hockey is just an absolute dud. Because they say hockey is so big in Europe. Okay, is it big in France? Is it big in England? Is it big in Spain? No, it's in countries like Finland and Denmark.
Scandinavia.
Scandinavia,
It's
and
where it's
like
cold.
where it's cold. Sure, yeah, absolutely. Now Russia's pretty big, but I mean, I just really don't see that profile being elevated in especially when it comes to a hockey sense. Now, to bring it back to football, because I was on a podcast with a couple of guys from Mississippi, and of course, you guys know how big football is in the state of Mississippi.
Mhm.
And when it comes to brain injuries and concussions and so on, like for a guy who's in my mid 40s, now I don't have kids. My like people who are my age who are parents, I mean their kids are teenagers now. I don't know a single person whose child is playing American football. Not one. And you guys probably have dozens. I mean, you guys probably played it. I just don't see American football taking off in Canada, because in the US, you guys have Friday Night Lights You guys have college football and so on. And the NFL experience in Skydome now, Skydome is a terrible stadium. It's not even that great for baseball. Hopefully the Reynolds are going to change that. But they like the NFL is quite popular, but if the team is, say, the Detroit Lions and has a 20 plus game losing streak and are 0-16, or if they're always in the basement, that team ain't gonna work.
So something too, I will say, just kind of like an additional comment on, I think, what you're talking about in terms of expanding in Europe, or at least internationally. I think the focus should never be bring new teams or create new franchises or teams in Europe unless it becomes overwhelmingly clear that that needs to happen. I think more so that just continues to be playing a couple games in a season, because like you said, I think culturally it's just never going to pick up in the way that it is in the US, or I guess I won't say the entirety of North America, but like, North America generally. I don't think we're ever going to see that happen. But I think it's less about saying let's expand and worry about how do we make this influential in these countries. It's more about, I don't want to say it's like part of the games is kind of the gimmick of like, oh, look at, we got the Americans in here with their football, and like even too with like the London game for baseball, which like again, I would say went over those two games have gone over, not like phenomenally, but like decently well. And it's been received enough, but it's not to the extent ever that you're gonna go, well, now the UK needs to get a baseball team. Like that's really like the next step. I think it's just more about expanding that interest and just getting international fans. And of course, maybe the long game for them is saying we do eventually expand that way, but I think it's a logistical nightmare. And I think too, like with saying like the impact from the Olympics of like flag football, I think it's more about that it just brings some more interest to the game, but never in I think the way that we're thinking about them potentially expanding. But I think it's just, because I think it's not on the level that we think it could be. I think it's more about just selling internationally, getting more jersey sales, getting more shirt merchandise shipped and sold, finding different areas that like creating a Packer bar in London and that being a whole thing, or that type of stuff. I think that's pretty much the most we're ever going to see from the NFL in that regard. But you brought up an interesting point too. Like, I think we can all agree, like my nephew, he plays, we call it like it's like Pop Warner, but there's
Pop
also,
Warner, I've heard, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
what's the other kid
Pee-wee
football? Oh, like
football?
Pee Wee. Yeah. And that it's just huge. And for me, it's always crazy. And it's something for me that like, think about, like, I was watching a movie from the 80s today, and like 80s movies, it's always like the parents go watch their kids play a baseball game. But now, that's not the trend in movies. And I think they're kind of reflecting that it's go watch your kid play football. And that's the part that does scare me, is just how much riskier the game is, where it's just you're so much more likely to get injured because they're tackling at a young age even, which again I guess is good because you're teaching them that skill of tackling safely.
And I think that's exactly the reason why football will not take. I mean, there
No.
is a bit of a reluctance, believe it or not, for parents to put their kids into hockey. That's why basketball is taking off more, and soccer. I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, and it just sounds like that football is still full steam ahead, and that there isn't a lot of reluctance to pull their kids, is there?
No.
Yeah.
No.
And yeah, it's weird. Like, I remember when I was in middle school, and like for reference, I'm a senior in college right now. So when I was in middle school, so you do the math on how far back that was. At this point, probably.
4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Oh, middle school, excuse me, like 8
8 years.
Yeah, sorry. It's been that long for me. Sorry.
It's all right. Yeah. So
Yeah, unless if you were like a Doogie Howser or like some brainiac. Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
Jake,
no.
go ahead.
It's all right. But yeah, so it was a little while. Like I remember being in middle school, and in like there was a whole conversation topic, because this is when like concussions in like the NFL were really starting to go up, and this is when we start the stats started coming out, like 99% of NFL players end up with CTE, and when the NFL started putting in all like these measures of trying to protect their players, and that now you had young kids, who were always playing football, who were having head injuries, and there was a whole conversation of like, should young kids be allowed to play football? Is it a good idea? And one side was, yes, it teaches toughness, it teaches maybe determination, things like that. And then there was the other side, to where it was oh, they shouldn't, it's too risky, they shouldn't play at all, they should wait till they're a little older, maybe in high school or something, or even college.
Mhm.
So, and now you fast forward a bunch of years later, like we all just talked about, it seems like everyone's kid plays football. Like, I can't tell you how many either friends I know who play football, my friends, younger brothers who play football. Like, I, walking around campus at Sacred Heart where I go to school, I can, go football player, football player, football player. Even if I'm like not friends with them, I know them. I work some of their game as part of just like I just know them. When I was in high school, even if I wasn't friends with them, I could just walking through the hallway be like, oh, I know him. I know him on the football team. I know him on the football team. I know him on the football team. So
Mhm.
it seems there's actually been kind of a shift. I'm not sure if it's just me who's felt that, but it seems there's been kind of a shift in that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I was wondering what how safe, or like, I mean, like well, what is the long-term viability, but I mean, obviously it's just the NFL is just on another planet, and I think the four of us are going to be long gone by the time the NFL starts to not be as popular. And probably never. But listen, guys, I just want to thank you guys so much for this great chat. Last time we got together, we did have a trivia game, and you guys did mention that you were able to, and willing to take part in round two. Is that right?
I think so.
Yes.
All
Yeah.
right. All right. So, just a reminder that Jake took the first edition of this trivia challenge. Is he going to retain his title? We will soon find out. So, I am going to start off, and basically what's going to happen is, for those who are not aware and you are listening in or watching on YouTube, that two of the three panelists are going to go back and forth with a sports related topic, and when somebody gets stumped, they are going to get a strike. The top two players will meet in the final. So Jake and Lily and Matt, they know the deal. We
Mhm.
are going to start with, I'm going to start with Jake and Lily. All right. So we did talk baseball for the first episode. Now we brought in football. We are going to have baseball and football related questions. So the question that I am going to ask Jake and Lily are winners of the Super Bowl since 1990. So you are going to give me the winning team of the Super Bowl since 1990. Repeat winners are only counted once, as you guys know. So we did it alphabetically the first time. So we're going to go the other way. And Lily is after Jake. So 3 seconds, Lily. It is going to start with you.
Rams.
Correct?
The New England Patriots.
Correct?
Green Bay Packers.
Correct?
Kansas City Chiefs.
Correct.
Philadelphia Eagles.
Correct?
The New York Giants.
Correct.
New Orleans Saints.
Correct.
The Baltimore Ravens.
Correct.
Oh. I think I'm out on this. Broncos. I can't remember.
Correct.
Oh god.
This gotta go way back, but Dallas Cowboys.
Correct.
49ers.
Correct.
I think. Oh, the Seattle Seahawks.
It's gonna go with
Correct.
Colts. That's my I think.
Correct.
Oh no. Oh no.
The Pittsburgh Steelers.
Correct.
Yeah, I think I'm gone now. Yeah.
Well
think-
done. Out of the 17 teams who have won the Super Bowl since 1990, you guys are only missing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Washington, what was then
Oh
called
my God.
Redskins
Oh,
in
I wasn't sure.
1992.
I wasn't sure if the Commanders had one. And I had one.
The
Wow.
Buccaneers is crazy to miss that.
I know it does happen.
And they did win in 2002 as well with
Yeah, I was
Brad
born.
Johnson. Brad Johnson winning, leading the Buccaneers to the Super Bowl. Well done, the both of you. So we are now going to go with Matt and Jake. All right. So Matt and Jake, we are going to do, we had such a great time with football in the first question. So now I'm going to ask you top 20 quarterbacks in passing yards all time. All-time passing yard quarterbacks. Matt is first up. 3 seconds. Starts with you.
Eli Manning.
Correct.
Tom Brady.
Correct.
Brett Favre.
Correct.
Peyton Manning.
Correct.
Dan Marino.
Correct.
Philip Rivers.
Correct.
Drew Brees.
Correct.
Matt Ryan.
Correct.
Ben Roethlisberger.
Correct.
So many guys have retired. Aaron Rodgers.
Correct.
John Elway.
Correct.
I'm
Going to
gonna
have to cap it.
Warren Moon.
Going to have to get Warren Moon was on the list. Jake, you were just a little bit shy. But what I'm seeing here is Fran Tarkenton. We have Joe Flacco, Vinny
Wow.
Testaverde.
Flacco.
Ben Tarkenton was my next guy.
Testaverde? Testaverde's there? Wow.
Yeah, and Russell Wilson is on the list as
Russell.
well.
Wow. Really?
Carson Palmer, Dan Fouts.
Wow.
Yeah, no, well done, the both of you. So that was a strike for Jake, correct? So Jake with a strike. So we are now going to go to Matt and Lily. So now if I'm not mistaken, so Jake has a strike, Lily has a strike. So things are going to get really interesting if Matt gets a strike as well. So what we are going to do now, we're going to talk, we're going to go back to baseball. And I am going to ask you, since the year 2000, managers who have won the World Series. Since 2000, there has been 19 different managers who have won the World Series. Matt is first up, and it's to you.
Joe Torre.
Correct.
Dusty Baker.
Correct.
Dave Martinez.
Correct.
Leland. I can't remember his first name.
Jim Leland with the Florida Marlins. That was in 1997.
97? Damn it.
Yeah, nice try, Lily.
Wow. I was trying to go deep cut and I'm years off.
I will say very impressive that you pulled Jim Leland. He was something else.
Yeah, no, he definitely he got to the series in 2004 but with Detroit. Well, no, 2012, excuse me. 2004, where did that come from? But yeah, no, with the Detroit Tigers. But Lily,
There we
no,
go.
great try. Just to share the rest of the list: Tony La Russa, there's Alex Cora, Dave Roberts, Mike Scioscia won it in 2002 with the Angels. So yeah, no, so we are off to the final, and it is against Matt and Jake. And I am going to ask you, since the World Series just finished just less than a month ago, I'm going to ask you the roster for the Texas Rangers. World Series roster, Texas Rangers. They, of course, brought the World Series to Arlington for the first time in their 63-year existence. And Matt is first up. 3 seconds, starts with you.
Aroldis Chapman.
Correct.
Jonah Heim.
Correct.
Adolis Garcia.
Correct.
Nate Lau.
Correct.
Evan Carter.
Correct.
Marcus Semien.
Correct.
Nate Eovaldi.
Correct.
Corey Seager.
Correct.
Jordan Montgomery.
Correct.
I see what Matt's doing for my Yankees. Josh Jung.
Correct.
The closer.
Okay, Maddie, I think we're gonna have to cap it.
I know who you were thinking of.
Oh, Spores?
Will Smith, he was thinking of.
Oh, Will Smith. All right, that was a great try. Guys, thank you so much once again. I hope you guys do enjoy this. I had a really great time the first time we did it, and
that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun.
That first round with Lily and yeah, that was awesome.
I pulled a couple.
Really ran the
out of
table
hat.
there.
Same.
Out of my hat. Oh my god. The last like 4 guesses, I thought I was not gonna guess.
Yeah, that's why I kept saying, I'm like, I don't think this is right, but I'll say it anyway.
Yeah,
You guys were trading barbs, and I was just like, "Oh my god, who's gonna do it?
I was like, definitely not the Jets. They definitely didn't win. They definitely haven't won the last 30 something years. I was thinking like the Falcons haven't won. I was like, I didn't think Washington won. I was gonna say them. I didn't think they had won. They were just inside.
They had Edmonton's own Mark Rippon as quarterback. Yeah, he had a cup of coffee with Washington, took him to the Super Bowl, and then he found himself in the CFL, and then things just but
weird career.
no, he did take him to the promised land, Washington. Yeah, that was a long time ago. But thank you so much, guys, for joining me today. I mean, we definitely covered a lot, and whether it's towards the spring training, or maybe if you guys want to get together another time, I am definitely down. To the 3 of you, Lily Schumacher, Matt Siriani, Jake Cardinale, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for being
Thank
a
you.
fantastic
Thank you,
host
Randy.
and giving us a
Yeah,
chance to
well,
talk.
I mean, you guys definitely carry me for sure. I mean, the knowledge you got, like I mean, my God, I need to brush up on my sports center. That's for sure compared to you guys.
Hey,
That-
same here though. It's like it's a constant battle, isn't it?
Yep.
There's always new stuff happening each and every day. So, as mentioned, for Jake Cardinale, Lily Schumacher, and Matt Siriani, I'm Randy Kure. It's What's Up the Sports podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe. We will talk to you next time.